Hey everybody, it is Tuesday afternoon, March 4th, 2025. I'm Dave Neal and I've got all of your stories for your rush hour ride home. On today's episode, we've got Jax Taylor, the Vanderpump Rules alumni, with the least shocking story of all time, explaining how he's addicted to cocaine. I'll share that story, plus an emotional tribute by an ice skater after losing her parents in that plane crash a few weeks back. I'll share that very touching tribute. Also, in the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni universe, a judge is allowing the internet to join court. Not entirely for the whole court case, but for this Thursday, we'll be sharing live audio, not video, just audio of what goes down. We can get a real tone for what the judge is thinking. And speaking of thinking, we're also going to discuss Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni, what lawyers are saying. Our good pal, tilted lawyer Omar, shares that it's more of a 50-50 toss-up than a lot of people think. Are you prepared for Justin Baldoni to lose? Also, speaking of losing, Ukraine has lost aid temporarily from the U.S. I'll share what they're saying, and stocks have taken a dive following the tariffs placed on China, Mexico, and Canada. I'll share what Canadian officials are saying. Make no mistake about it, this is an all-out, full-blown trade war, and Canada is not going down without a fight. I'm going to share all those stories and more. It's all happening right now on The Rush. Quick update for anybody looking to travel during the spring break. You're going to need a real ID. You got to make sure, do you have real ID or not? I think most people have it at this point, but here is the update.
Transportation officials are warning people that the clock is ticking to get your real ID. They held a news conference this morning at Philadelphia International Airport. If you want to fly anywhere in the country, you will need a real ID driver's license by May 7th. If you don't have one, you'll need a passport. To get a real ID, you need to bring in proof of identity, address, social security card, or resident card to your local state driver's license.
All right, so that's May. You have until May 7th to get that done. Look, I think most states have enacted real ID for years now, so you're probably okay. Well, we've been talking about Honora. It won all of the awards at the Oscars. Now here's the director talking about wanting sex work decriminalized. Of course, the movie features a stripper, an adult dancer, as it were. And here's what he has to say.
I've been pretty outspoken about my stance on sex work. It's our oldest profession, yet it has an incredible unfair stigma applied to it. And what I've been trying to do with my films is sort of chip away at that very unfair stigma. Personally, I think it should be decriminalized, and I guess through my work, through hopefully humanizing my characters that are usually seen as perhaps caricatures in most film and television, it will help do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Same thing with the war on drugs. I think if you decriminalize prostitution and the war on drugs, what you're doing is entering a world where it doesn't have to be done in the dark. And by that, I mean behind closed doors. That's where abuse can really happen. So if it's, I think, other countries have proven this, whether it be the Netherlands or Portugal, when it comes to decriminalizing or legalizing drugs, what you learn is you take away the black market that exists for the sex work industry or the drug world, and you can regulate it in a way where you can have an oversight to make sure someone's not being trafficked and they're working off their free will, things like that. It only makes sense to me that if we have compassion for humanity, we look at it from a different lens. And I think, artwork, especially films like this, do a good job of that. Here's a sad story. Bodybuilder Jodi Vance, not JD Vance, Jodi Vance, dead at 20 after a fatal heart attack. When I read this story, I immediately thought, man, this has to do with taking bodybuilding supplements. And of course, it seems as though that was right. Her heart stopped due to complications of severe dehydration. Despite all efforts by the hospital, they were unable to revive her. She was a beautiful person inside and out, and she'll be missed every single day. So not only was it sudden and unexpected, but her coach said that she didn't have a bodybuilding show scheduled, but with that, she used two extremely hazardous substances to improve her physique, and they were not approved. Look, I one time took a diuretic, like a real diuretic that bodybuilders use, and let me tell you something. It is insane. It is very dangerous, and the weight cutting that happens, it's just very dangerous because you can it's all about shedding all of your liquids so you can look like you have a better physique. And anyhow, sadly, she died of a heart attack. Here's a very interesting story. A standing ovation for Isabella Aparicio after the loss of her father and brother. She honors her late brother Franco and father who lost their lives on Flight 5342. Here's the moment when she finished her ice skating routine. And if you're listening on audio only, it's a standing ovation from the crowd. Very powerful moment as she breaks down in tears. Richmond stands with the families of Flight. And there she is. So, it's a very sad and tragic ending to so many people's lives that were on that flight, regular pedestrians, and also those that were up-and-coming ice skaters and coaches. So very, very sad, but we're going to start to see more tributes like that as people start to go on with their lives and get back on the ice. Jax Taylor reveals a cocaine addiction on a Hot Mic podcast, says, I'm proud to say I'm 83 days sober. I'm happy for him. I'm just not surprised. If someone said, do you think Jax Taylor has a cocaine addiction? I would look at him and go, maybe. Here's the clip. And, well, by the way, before I play it, no better time to talk about your sobriety than while pitching season 2 of The Valley. And look, I mean, you could kill 2 birds with one stone, I guess.
This was the time to do it. We have season 2 of The Valley coming out shortly, and
so he says that we got the new season coming out. But either way, here's the tear-jerking moment where he, admits something that maybe a strong man like him wouldn't normally admit, which is that he is relatively powerless over this addiction.
Kind of coming. This is tough to say. So I am coming out that I'm an addict. I have substance issues, primarily with cocaine. That's hard to say out loud. I've been dealing with this for, I think, the last, on and off since I was 23. So I'm 45. So give or take, I've been, there was times where I would stop doing it, but then there was times where I'd go heavy on it. I think a lot of people who watched Vanderpump Rules over the years could kind of tell that I was on something.
Yeah, no shocker there. And look, I feel for the man. The problem with Vanderpump Rules, whether it be Tom Sandoval, Jax Taylor, all these quote-unquote villains, is they were being rewarded for their debauchery. So the things that rated well on the show were them kind of having like these roid rage coked out fights. And even though you might look at him and say, this is some tattooed muscle man, egomaniac, sure, absolutely. But good for him to figure out that he has a problem and know that he can start to tell his story, not from a place of addiction, but from a place of sobriety. And I don't know. I'm interested. I'm actually interested to continue watching The Valley. To be quite honest, I found it to be a good show. I'll continue to cover it over here. But yeah, I mean, that's what grace is all about, right? It's not just having grace for the underdog. It's having grace for the asshole. That's the hard part, right? Is to have grace for the asshole and the villains, and understand that even though they may look like a big bad whatever, when it comes down to it, his voice, timbre, and broken down shares his own struggle. I like to see that. I don't know about you guys, but I like to see that. All right, well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We're going to come back, and we've got, believe it or not, more Blake Lively news to get to. That next. All right, I'm going to get to the Blake Lively stuff right after this moment. And I have to tell you, this is a hard one to talk about. And how indulgent of me to say how hard it is when I'm not the one living through this hell. But one of our audience members, Katie, has reached out to me and let me know that her son, Benji, has a brain cancer, brain tumor, and it's I think spread to a different part of the brain stem. It's got to be a living nightmare. And one way we can help support is to donate to the cause. They've already received $16,000. But if you're in my community and you're new here, we often do this. We'll raise money for single moms in the Christmas season. We'll raise money for teachers to help them decorate their classrooms. And it really all comes down to using whatever leverage and equity we have as a community to try to help out with people having tough situations. I'll post a link in the comment section and in the description if you guys can help out. Honestly, even just $5, $10 donations will be received by Katie, and she will see and receive some of that joy. She says here in her GoFundMe that she hasn't been able to work much since the diagnosis last July. And, it's an aggressive form of brain cancer. So, we wish her and her family well. And if there's any positive thoughts, prayer, energy you can send her way, I'm sure it will be well received. So again, hard pivot from that story, but I've been wondering where to, how do you get these messages from people? And it's so overwhelming to think you might have a platform that can help out even in a little way. Prove me right. Prove me right, folks. Link in the comment section, and we'll get updates about Benji. Sending him lots of love. Justin Baldoni is confident in his motion fight with New York Times, so says Albertson and Davidson LLP. They were on my channel last week, and I'll be back on their channel, I think, this week. Well, here is the moment where the guys, Stuart Albertson and Keith Davidson, discuss how the hell did the New York Times get a subpoena that included all those text messages. And by asking this question, I think they're implying that there is definitely more shifty work going on.
Keith, there's this issue that's just troubling both of us, and that is, how did Megan Twohey get all these thousands of pages of text messages and emails and other things via a subpoena? We're perplexed by this, and maybe somebody has the answer for us. What's the issue there?
Yeah, so here's the issue. This has always kind of been bothering me in the back of my mind, is that Megan Twohey says in her article that Blake Lively obtained all of these text messages through subpoena. Okay, what's subpoena? You can only issue a subpoena if you have an open legal case. So you have to have a valid legal case. I can't just issue a subpoena to, the New York Times.
And my question, and they obviously know a lot more than I do, my question when watching this was, is there some way where Megan Twohey coordinates with Blake Lively where they say, we want to gather it all, but we need to do it through some legal situation to verify everything? But I guess that's not the case. So yeah, finding out what this subpoena was would be very interesting, because without the subpoena, it means it's clear that Blake Lively just dumped all of this info to the New York Times, right?
If I'm not involved in a lawsuit with them, or in some sort of lawsuit where they're a non-party witness. So, and the subpoena would have been before the CRD complaint right, and before the lawsuit that was filed in New York on December 31st. And there was a lawsuit filed between Stephanie Jones and Jen Abel, but even that came, I believe, December 26th. So I'm sitting here thinking, what lawsuit was pending before the CRD complaint, or around this, I guess it'd be before the CRD complaint, where somebody could issue a subpoena? I'm at a loss. I don't know.
Well, and again, I think the people, and I think it was somebody on Reddit pointed out the metadata of some of the uploads of the photos and how it went back to October, I believe is what it was. This article also wasn't written in 24 hours. There was a CRD complaint, and then the article came about 24 hours later. And there was just a very limited time for Justin Baldoni and his team to respond to it. They did get a response out, by the way. But again, they're blasted with this. And it looks like the Times may have had more time to.
And of course, they absolutely did. Great work by Albertson and Davidson. Go give them a listen. But yeah, I think from the legal aspect, it's interesting to ask the question about explain this subpoena. And will they have to explain that in court? I'm not really sure. So I was listening last night to our good pal Omar from The Tilted Lawyer, and I wanted to share his thoughts on this case and who's winning. But first, he gave our channel a nice shout out. Have a listen to this.
How he mixes his humor in.
And he's hilarious, man. You want to know what else? He is disarmingly intelligent. The first time I talked to Dave Neal, on the phone was about the Laura Owens case.
Disarmingly intelligent, folks. Take that, community college. Should we get some merchandise? That must mean my audience is disarmingly intelligent. All right, here's the real point, and thanks so much for the kind words, Omar. Here is Omar discussing the case and who he thinks is winning. And while a lot of people think, wow, Justin Baldoni's got this in the bag, pump your brakes.
Who do I think is winning? Honestly, I think it's a lot closer than you think it is if you take into account the totality of the causes of actions against both sides. I think when was this lawsuit filed? At the end of December? Was it the end of December?
Sure.
Yeah, during the wildfires, right?
Yeah, it's during the fires. That's right. What we have here is there's a lot of overreaching on both sides with claims of this and that. But really what this case is going to ultimately be about is a case of how you conduct PR in Hollywood, what's allowed and what's not allowed. How is it possible that one individual can work behind the scenes to influence the minds, the hearts and minds of those with influence in the industry to potentially squash another individual such as a Justin Baldoni?
Yeah, and it's a good question to ask. And, is astroturfing allowed as long as it's true stuff? It's not defamation if it's true. So there'll be a lot of ethical questions that come from the case with regard to which side might have overstepped their boundaries. And of course, Justin, they both have a lot to prove. That's why a lot of people think it's just going to settle, that it's not going to go anywhere. All right. So next we're going to discuss Ukraine and then the tariffs. We've got everyone worried about what's going on with these tariffs, the trade wars, and also Ukraine. First, of course, this Ukraine story happened or reached its fever pitch after Jodi Vance was accusing Zelensky of not saying thank you enough. Here's Jodi Vance's update on what needs to happen before the U.S. gives any aid to Ukraine.
What the president has said very clearly about our Ukraine policy is that he wants the Ukrainians to come to the negotiating table. We want the Ukrainians to have a sovereign and an independent country. We think the Ukrainian troops have fought very bravely, but we're at a point here where neither Europe nor the United States nor the Ukrainians can continue this war indefinitely. So it's important that everybody come to the table, and the president is trying to send a very explicit message. The Ukrainians have got to come to the table and start negotiating with President Trump.
Now, Zelensky, the reason why they got in the fight was he responded and saying, how do you want me to come to the table? We've already tried to do that with him. So where's the good faith? Where has Russia come to the table to negotiate? Are we just okay with them taking over people's lands? And you might say, well, is that a reason enough to be in a war? Quick answer, heck yeah. Heck yeah, it is, because this is their sovereign land. And here is some receipts provided by Caitlin Collins here about Zelensky actually not apologizing, but Zelensky saying, yeah, no, I've given thanks a lot, even though they accuse him of not being grateful.
Vice President Vance was criticizing Zelensky for not saying thank you specifically during that meeting, those 40 to 50 minutes that we were in the Oval Office. But certainly, very well, Secretary Rubio, your time as a senator here in Washington, that whenever Zelensky has come to Washington before, he has very much expressed that kind of gratitude. Just listen to this.
Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us. Really, all my appreciations from my heart, from the heart of Ukrainians, all Ukrainians. So what can I say to American people in English? My English is poor. To say all my messages and all my thanks to you. And thank you very much for supporting us, our people.
Thank you, United States. Thank you, America.
Ukraine is grateful to the United States for its overwhelming support.
Do you think you can make the argument that he hasn't said thank you?
Well, I think the vice president said he hadn't said it today. He hadn't heard it today in that meeting. And we were hoping that meeting would begin by thank you for everything you've done for us. We wouldn't be where we are today without you. We wouldn't even have a chance to negotiate a peace without the help you gave us. By the way, without the help you gave us when you were president in the first term, because President Obama refused to provide them defensive capabilities.
Why does this feel like a domestic partnership where it's like, honey, I said I'm sorry, but you didn't mean it? Like, what the hell is going on? I mean, all they wanted was a thank you. I guess this one wasn't good enough. This was from the beginning of Zelensky's speech.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for your invitation. And really, I hope that this first document, will be first step to real security guarantees for Ukraine.
All right, so, and of course it all blows up, but he said, thank you, President, thank you for having me. I mean, what do you want from the guy? Now, it's rich that Jodi Vance wants Zelensky to say thank you. And Jodi Vance, I mean, it's not his money being sent to Ukraine. He first of all, he's like a puppet. He's only in government because a billionaire paid for his campaign to get him there in the first place. So we can't even imagine that he even thinks for himself at this point. So a lot of collateral damage has been done by Jodi Vance and continues to be done, which my question is, does Trump know about this? Does he care? Is Jodi Vance possibly worse than Trump? Here's what the UK has to say regarding his flippant comments about what is supposed to be our allies and friends.
Americans' economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
Wow. A vice president who is as dumb as he's aggressive. That takes some doing because, Mr. Vice President, that's some random country that's not fought a war. That would be the United Kingdom, who stood alongside your troops in Iraq, not once, but twice, and in Afghanistan.
Let me tell you something. Fuck J.D. Vance. This guy, I mean, he did it with women, calling them cat ladies. He does this with literally anybody that's not part of his inner circle. He's such a dark soul. It's very strange. I mean, he is unifying people. It's just people being unified against him. Europe is literally rearming themselves because of all of this rhetoric.
We're living in the most momentous and dangerous of times. I do not need to describe the grave nature of the threats that we face or the devastating consequences that we will have to endure if those threats would come to pass. We are in an era of rearmament. And Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending.
And they should. Because that's really the safest thing you can do at a time like this. A vacuum is created when someone like the United States starts pulling out of protecting its allies. And I understand we shouldn't be the only people whose GDP goes towards the military. I'm all for cutting so much of the military's expenses, but you have to know when it's a reason. It's one thing to be spending billions on these planes we don't need, and $800 staplers and all these other audits that they've done that show all of the waste, but it's another when it's like an actual threat. And in the fact that there's an actual war approaching the doorsteps of our allies. Now let's go into the tariffs. Trump's tariffs are in effect, and here's how they affect us. Have a listen.
Yesterday was a tough day in the market because it became clear that these Mexico and Canada tariffs were going to go into effect, and there will be retaliation. Already we're hearing retaliation. And the president yesterday also said he was raising the China tariffs another 10%. So you got 20% tariffs on stuff coming in from China, Mexico, and Canada. That started at midnight. So that means, just like the CEO of Target said, the stuff that they're picking up at the port today, they will be handed a bill from Customs that says you owe us another 25%. And so immediately that is a cost for business. The Best Buy CEO this morning also saying that its vendors are indicating that they're going to have to pass along those higher costs along the supply chain. Translation, you're going to pay more for computers and smartphones and the stuff that you buy. You can see the market.
And of course, that's going to, we're going to see that take effect in the days and weeks to come. I think the reason why the stock market's not doing worse is there's a little bit of boy who cried wolf. People don't know how long Trump is going to keep these tariffs, but I'll tell you who's not playing around: the Canadians. The Canadians are not playing around. Here is Ontario Premier Doug Ford. He already said he's willing to cut off power, which would be devastating. I mean, people's lives are at risk if power is cut off to some of the states that rely on Canada for power. But can you blame them?
He put up a smoke screen. He keeps moving the goalposts. Well, the market is speaking loud and clear. The market is going to go downhill faster than the American bobsled team, and we're going to continue seeing in the U.S., plants close, assembly lines shut down. In the auto sector, they may last 5, maybe 8 days before the parts that go back and forth across the border 8 times. This is unnecessary.
Yeah, not only unnecessary, but as it's been explained, the parts go across the border. If you've ever been to Detroit, you're one exit away from Canada, right? So they go back and forth across the border. These tariffs affect the consumer. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to buy a Toyota. That's what you're going to do. And then the Chinese market, the Japanese market are going to benefit from some of these tariffs that we have going on with Canada and Mexico. Here is a conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre. Am I pronouncing that right? And he talks about how the President Trump stabbed his people in the back.
12:01 a.m., President Trump stabbed America's best friend in the back.
8-2, Bruto.
My message to the President is this: Canada will fight back. We will defend our people and our economy, and we will put Canada first. There's no doubt that our economy will suffer, but so will yours, President Trump. In fact, you're already paying the price, with trillions of dollars erased in stock market value over the last month of these threats. Already Americans are paying higher gas prices, as at midnight, a new American gas tax kicked in on U.S. working class taxpayers and motorists.
So they talk about all the ways they're going to be boycotting American goods and promoting Canadian products, and that unification has already happened. So we've already been affected by this. Again, the American people. Here's what Jon Stewart has to say in response.
Now, in Trump's defense, he did explain today why we're going after Canada.
I mean, I look at some of the deals made, I say, who the hell made these deals that are so bad?
So bad. The trade deals with Canada, they're so bad. He's just looking and saying, who made these? Ladies and gentlemen, don't get ahead of me. Ladies and gentlemen, for your dining and dancing pleasure, come with me into the Wayback Machine to 2018. I give you the culprit of the terrible deal with Canada.
This morning, President Trump signed a new trade deal to replace NAFTA with the leaders of Mexico and Canada.
The best trade deal they say ever made.
No! A deal done by Trump's greatest nemesis, Trump.
So there it is. I mean, what do you want? You know, that's why Jon Stewart should be the next president of the United States. He can use humor to shame people and realize how stupid they sound. Well, looks like Starlink is attached to the U.S. government at this point as Elon Musk runs Doge, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford says they will be doing no government contracts with American companies.
So starting today, all U.S.-based companies will be banned from taking part in government procurement. Every year, the province and its agencies spend about $30 billion on procurement, alongside our more than $200 billion plan to build infrastructure.
Great. Way to break something that wasn't fixed. Is that the saying? Break something that doesn't need to be fixed? And again, even when these tariffs are done, all of the infrastructure has been worked on by other countries to make sure they live in a world where they don't need us. But there is unity, not amongst Americans, but between Canada and Mexico. Here is President Sheinbaum talking about retaliatory tariffs that the Mexicans are now placing on United States goods.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum just last hour responding to the imposition of those tariffs. She condemned them and promised retaliation, saying there is, quote, no justification for 25% tariffs on all of those imports. Sheinbaum says she's going to announce the response, the content of her response and retaliation on Sunday. The Mexican president also called for better cooperation between countries to fight the opioid crisis, saying the U.S. government also needs to take responsibility for its role in that crisis.
Of course. I mean, the U.S. has the demand, right? We're the ones buying these drugs. So either way, you thought margaritas were already pretty expensive at Diego's. They're only getting more. Now, this is where it gets a little crazy, right? So what has happened naturally? Naturally, Americans have come together and said, we don't want this. Both Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, libertarians, unaffiliated people have all said the USAID cutting has affected our farms. I mean, literally, blue-collar people across the country are coming together, and they want to make it sound like it's all paid crisis actors. Have a listen.
Videos you saw of the town halls were for paid protesters in many of those places. These are Democrats who went to the events early and filled up the seats. If the videos had panned
You can't argue they were all
building,
paid protesters, though, Mr. Speaker.
Many of them were. I don't know.
What's wrong with y'all?
He goes, many of them were. I don't know. It's just, this is ridiculous. So rather than listen to the American people, they're trying to sow doubt and say that it's all a conspiracy, that people are actually happy. Are they? Are they really happy? Do they give two flying fucks about all of the bullshit that's going on? No. They want cheaper groceries. They want the economy to be stabilized so that maybe eventually interest rates can come down. They want simple things like their jobs back.
What's wrong with y'all? You don't need to send paid protesters into your town hall meetings. The American people are with us all across the country. People are rising up to push back against the assault on the economy.
Well, I mean, maybe. Or this veteran right here, is he a paid protester? A Republican senator walks out on his constituents in the middle of them asking questions. Have a listen to this.
Now, as far as cutting out those jobs, a huge percentage of those people, and I know you care about the veterans, are veterans. Yes. And that is a damn shame.
So that's a veteran saying, you're cutting all these jobs of other veterans, and that's a damn shame. Sounds pretty legit to me.
Yeah. That is a damn shame.
I'm not a Democrat, but I'm worried about the veterans, man.
And someone says, I'm not a Democrat, and I'm also worried about the veterans. This doesn't have to be a political party issue. We should all be worried about the veterans, and we should all be worried about the elderly and the people that can't afford health care, that were on Medicaid, that now aren't going to have insurance, which means your insurance is going to go up, your private. I mean, all of these issues are connected, and it's not because you have a D or an R next to your name. It's because we're all goddamn Americans.
Let's go. Thank you. Well, I yielded to one of my elders, and I appreciate his comments. I think it's a great. We don't have time for everyone to stand up. I do got 2 more commitments today. Appreciate everybody making the drive out, and God bless America. Thank you.
And so then he leaves, and the crowd goes crazy. So this crowd of apparently paid Democrats is upset that their senator left, and he was supposed to only be there for an hour. Listen to these boos. Are these paid boos? These sound like unpaid boos to me. So there it is, folks. That's the country we live in. But I tell you what, you can't be silenced. You have more power than you think. And as these communities all come together, farmers, city folk, businessmen, blue-collar workers, as the middle class comes together and finally realizes that they've been robbed and that it's not a left versus right issue, it's a top versus down. Multiple billionaires in the cabinet, a billionaire president, a billionaire, the richest man in the world, who helped buy an election with $250 million worth of bribes to get him into a position where he can cut government agencies that were already looking into him, help himself get better government contracts, try to get mineral deals that's going to help his car batteries. When we see that we're being robbed, all of these cuts, the cuts to the veterans, the cuts to Social Security, all the Medicaid, all these things that are happening, and when we realize that our taxes are still going up, defense spending is still going up, and tax cuts will only be for people making over $400,000. It's a complete opposite of what we need. We need to tax wealthy people at a higher level so that that marginal additional amount of income that can come in through taxing can help out the parts of the community that maybe lost their jobs due to automation or lost their jobs for other reasons. This is how we help our country. A populist and progressive movement of Americans in the middle class and the lower class coming together to say, look, the world doesn't need more billionaires. It needs more people that are working side by side in a community that lifts each other up. The billionaire class is just siphoning that money, and sadly, we'll have some of you guys try to defend the billionaires as if you're close to that level. So, as senators walk out on you, just realize we'll be here to continue to speak truth to power. We'll be here to continue to expose and share a grassroots movement of Americans coming together. Sadly, it's taken a lot of divisiveness, but we don't need to worry about someone's political affiliation, because as Americans, we can look out for each other regardless of who we voted for, and that can start right now. All right, that's it for me. I'll be back in the morning. I'm Dave Neal, and this is The Rush.